Kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1756, Storytime. Everybody has a story to tell. But before I tell you a story, it's not a good story. Well, it is, but it isn't. But you can judge for yourself. So, I have to tell you about a show I just finished watching. This show was one I've been watching over the last few nights. It's called Darby and Joan. Was it Darby and June? Oh, jeepers, no, I can't remember. It is pretty sure, yeah, Darby and Joan. Okay, so Darby and Joan stars Brian Brown, who is a very well-known Australian actor, and Greta Sachi, who is, no, hang on. That's not how you say it. Yeah, I think that is Sachi. That's how you say her last name. Who is a British actor. And what it is that Joan's husband passes away in Australia when he is supposed to be in Spain. So she then decides she's going to go to Australia and figure out what happened to him, why he was there, and where he died and all of that sort of stuff. You know, what are the circumstances surrounding his death? Because she did ID his body and everything else. And so she goes down there and she gets an RV and goes tootling off around Queensland and Australia, because that's where he was at the time. And in the very first episode, she meets Jack Darby. Now, she's a retired nurse. Then she meets Jack Darby, who they meet with a bang. I'm going to put it that way. They meet with a bang. You have to watch it to figure it out. And Jack Darby is a retired police officer from the Australian Police Force and stuff. And he is traveling with his dog, Diesel. And so the two of them, along with Diesel, end up traveling around in this RV around Queensland, following her husband's last days, and all these different stories come to light. And here's a story in here. But a cozy mystery thing. And the first season is 6 episodes. The last, they started airing in 2022. I think it was like August, and there's only like eight episodes in the first season. So we're still not sure if they've picked up for a second season, but they left a nice little, they have set it up that there could be a follow-on season. And I just really, really hope that they do that. But what was really cool is they actually had a 9th episode that was like about 3 minutes long. And it was quick words from both the main actors in there. And then it talked about where they decided to shoot the episodes and things. And they say this series is kind of like a love letter to Australia, especially to Queensland, because they take you around all these well-known spots in Queensland and some of the not so well-known spots. And there's different Australian personalities that have guest appearances in the shows and things like that. But it was just a really cool series. And I just absolutely fell in love. I mean, you got a widow who is RVing and then she ends up with traveling with a police. Now, there is no romance between them. They're just friends. He's been married. You find out he's been married 2.5 times, and you'll have to watch to find out how there's a half in there. But you know, a widow traveling around in an RV with a dog. So it was kind of like, okay, I have to watch this. There was just when I read about it, I was like, okay, I got to watch this. It was a very delightful series to watch. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Lots of laughter in there, some good serious moments in there. It was just a really cool series. So if you get a chance to watch it, now I watched it on Acorn. I believe in Canada you can find it on Apple TV. Here in the States, if you look on Apple TV, you'll see it, but it says that it's got to go through Acorn. So here in the States, it's on Acorn. But it's a really cool series. It's Darby and June, a really cool series. And then I started watching another series, which was only 3 episodes. It was a documentary. It was over 3 episodes. Each episode is around 47 minutes each. Oh, my gosh. There's a reason Mark Twain said that you know, truth is strange. You know, I always remember, and watching this, I had to remember Mark Twain's quote of "Truth is stranger than fiction. That's why fiction has to make sense." And I'm paraphrasing that a little bit. yeah, when you watch this documentary, um, it just blew my mind. Um, this woman got conned by this guy, discovered she wasn't the only one, and set out to make sure that everybody knew who he was. When he went to jail for the first time, she knew that he'd been sentenced 5.5 years. For 5 years. He'd be out in 2.5. But she wanted to make sure that he was all over the place. If anybody Googled his name, his everything about him would come up, and it would be like a warning to people. But she met different people through this thing. They even ended up with their own private Facebook group where they could share their stories together. And because they were sharing their stories, they were able to find the support with each other, which was really, really cool. And the TV series was called, oh goodness, what was it called? Hang on, I got to go back here a second. The Other Mrs. Jordan. Hang on, let's just put up. Catching the Ultimate Con Man. Now, it says it is the shocking story of how one man manipulated an intelligent, independent woman, conning her out of over £200,000 and leaving her to bring up the children he originally claimed he was physically incapable of fathering. And this documentary is based on the book, The Bigamist, The True Story of a Husband's Ultimate Betrayal. And it talks about how first of all, how she met, it's her story of how she met him. Then the story starts taking these little twists and turns and things, and how she finds out that she's not the only Mrs. Jordan out there. And I will tell you this, it was insane watching it. It was I basically watched all 3 episodes in one go. And I finished just before I came online here, and it just blew my mind what this guy did. It turned out there was over 20 women involved, and for somebody who said he couldn't father children, last count that I saw on the show said there was something like at least 14 children that they know of that he fathered. I don't know if that number went up after they mentioned that number or not, because yeah, but he's currently behind bars. I think he's still behind. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's still behind bars. Yes, he is still. He's behind bars right now. But it was an insane story, and I'm thinking story time. Oh yeah, we should all be telling our stories. There are times that we have the good, the bad, and the ugly, and sometimes those stories need to be told, especially the ugly ones. They need to be told, because during those ugly times we learn lessons during that time. We stretch, we grow. Those ugly times help us stretch and grow and become the people we are today. And I know you've heard me say this many times, and if you're new, you're going to hear it for the first time. Brad, my late husband, would always ask me, if you could go back and change anything, would you? I said, no. He goes, not even me getting cancer, not even you getting cancer. He's like, why? I said, because we would not be the couple we are today, or the individuals that we are today, had we not been through that journey that you went through with cancer. And but during his funeral, at his funeral service, when I was doing his eulogy, I said, if anybody else asked me that today, I would just ask for more time. I still ask for one. Would love to have had more time with him. Because we had so much that we were planning on, and we had all these plans about places we we're going to go. We had a 14-night cruise booked to go through the Panama Canal, and we only had to get, and we're trying to figure out how to get without flying, because he was actually medically not allowed to fly. So we're trying to figure out how to get him from California to Florida, so we could, so that we could then catch the cruise ship and take it back to, I'm pretty sure it was San Diego that cruise was going to end. So we wouldn't have to fly at all. So I was trying to figure out a way to get him from one side of the country to the other without flying. And yeah, because we couldn't do a road trip, because that meant a vehicle, and what do we do with the vehicle at the other end, and that sort of stuff. So, we were, even though he was in hospital, and this is when he'd been in hospital a few days, a few weeks, we're sitting, we're talking about this thing and trying to come up with how we were going to do, how to get from California to Florida in comfort for him, that wouldn't upset his medical issues that he had, and to be able to take this cruise. And because he had crushed vertebrae in his back, which meant he couldn't lay flat or get comfortable. So then what were we going to do? if we had to drive across the country, like do a one-way rental, then what were we going to do for accommodation so that he would be comfortable and being able to sleep? I would be the one doing the majority of the driving, because at that point he wasn't driving, because he just couldn't. So I would be the one doing the driving, but it wasn't just that. It's the fact that we would be spending long hours in a vehicle, and then we'd have to be stopping at hotels for the night, and how can we make him comfortable so that he could sleep and that sort of thing as well. So we knew most of his sleep would be done in the day. He'd just recline his seat back to his comfortable position, and he'd be out for most of the ride. And I'll just be basically driving by myself while he slept. I think that's kind of like what we ended up with. But, it was going, finding the stories and stuff in life, and that was one of those times where it's we were forward planning. Death was not on our radar. Well, even if it was, we weren't mentioning it. But we were trying to create the future and create those dreams. To give him, it was to give me something to look forward to, give him something to look forward to, something that we could look forward together as a couple. And but yeah, I always said to him, I says, we wouldn't be the people we are today had we not been through the experiences we've been through. Sometimes we need to let people know about those experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, because it's during those ugly times that we do our most growing, our most stretching. It's where we are pushed to the limits, and we have those breakthroughs that come through in the ugly times. People need to know the ugly times that led to that breakthrough. Brad's death has been a big part of one of my struggles over the last almost 7 years, 6.5 years of finding my way as me as an individual instead of me as a couple. It's not been an easy journey. There are days it's really awesome and really great and super fantastic and sparkling, and there's other days where it's not so super fantastic and sparkling. There are some days that I do struggle, but I keep going in the back of my mind, no matter what happens today is always super fantastic and sparkling. No matter what happens today is always super fantastic and sparkling. And that has pulled me, and just repeating that over and over and over again has helped me a lot. And my accountability coach has got me into chanting. And I'm sort of like, half the time I can't even remember what the words are. So I actually found it on Spotify. So I just play it. I just have it on a loop. So it just plays over and over and over again. It repeats every 30 minutes because this one's 30 minutes long. And there's times that I'm listening to it and I'm going, those don't sound like the words to the chant at all. And other times listening to it and I'm like going along with the chant as well. So yes, that has helped as well. But I've also got my own little chant that I do. No matter what happens today is always super fantastic and sparkling. No matter what happens today is always super fantastic and sparkling. And that does help. That helps lift the mood as well when I'm not feeling at my most sparkliest. So, there are struggles that I go through, and am I going to tell those stories? Absolutely, because it's going to help. It may help a family member later on down the road, or it may help somebody who I don't even know to get through a struggle that they're going through. It's one of the reasons that I volunteered with Immerman Angels during the time that Brad was undergoing cancer treatment, and I would be a mentor to other cancer caregivers. And through my experiences, they were able to learn that, learn what it was like, how to cope with different things. I was not there as a coach. I was just there to say, this is my experience. This is my story. And I was sharing my story with the people I was mentoring and telling them my story so it gave them hope. It gave them some ideas on things that they could try, things that they could do, making sure they were taking care of themselves. I was not there as a coach. I was not there as an advisor. I was just there as a mentor of somebody who had been through it, and I was willing to listen to whatever they had to say. Some wanted to do phone calls. Some just wanted a weekly email. So my weekly email would be like, hey, how did you get on with blah, 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 blah. Here's a little bit more of my story. And and in the normal news. And the normal news would be anything that was not related to cancer. So, and they appreciated the time I took to write those news. And they said they especially love the normal news. I said, okay, that's why that's at the bottom, so that you have to read through the other stuff to get to the normal news. That's your reward for reading through what's put above. And they're like, okay, we get it. And others just wanted to call. And so I had them so they could call me any time of the day or night. if they were in the middle of, they were just so stressed out, they didn't know what to do, I said, call me. I said, I don't care if you just sit on the phone and just sob. I don't care. If you just want to sit, that's me giving you my shoulder to cry on. If you need to cry, and you just want somebody to be with you, I said, call me. I said, I can't be with you there physically, but I can be there with you at the other end of the phone. So that was one thing that I really got a lot of gratitude out of. I was grateful that that I'd been through the journey I'd been through to that point where I was able to turn around and help others through their journey, which was not the same as mine, but similar. There was a lot of similarities. So telling your story can help others as well. And if you're telling the ugly stories, like I said, that's where the biggest rewards come from. So being able to tell your ugly stories, those are the ones where you do your most growing, your most awakenings, you have the most awakenings, you have the most breakthroughs on. Let people know the story behind the story. I went through this and da-da-da-da. Okay, well, what did you feel as you were going through this? How did you cope with it? How did you push past that barrier to get through to break through to the other side? What helped you? Who helped you? What did you learn during that journey? Because those ugly journeys are huge learning lessons, and they help us stretch and grow and become a better person. I believe the best stories are the ugly ones. And I know that's hard for some of you to hear. Some of you go, oh, but you don't know how ugly my story is. Trust me, you have not heard my ugly stories. There's very few people that have heard my ugly stories. Yeah, I don't know if I may actually write them eventually, but for now, those ugly stories are staying ugly stories, and I haven't put them out there yet. But I may end up writing them and putting them in my book at some point. Yes, I'm still writing that book. I haven't done any writing for a few weeks now, and I'm kind of like, I need to get back to that because I'm kind of walking around feeling a little lost, and it's because I'm not doing my daily journals. I'm not doing my writing. And I keep missing my days of chanting. So I got reminded this morning on my accountability call to chant. So that will be done. So remember to tell your stories. They leave a legacy because, in 100 years from now, people are going to, what was it like living through? And there's going to be different historical things. Like there's going to be the global pause. What was it like living through the global pause? What was it like with the different hurricane disasters that we've had? Did you live through those hurricane disasters? What was your story about that? Where were you on 9/11? What happened on 9/11? What were your thoughts? Where were you? How did it affect you? When we had the global pause, where were you when news broke out about that, when they started doing the lockdowns? What was it like being in lockdown? What was it like having to walk around in masks? And I'm just like, yeah, that's why I didn't walk around a lot. And it helps you to become relatable to some of your future generations when they can turn around and go, oh, our second great grandmother. Just remember, you're going to be somebody's second great grandmother one day, or grandfather. What was it? My friend Francesca. She would say that we are our future generation's ancestors. So I love that. So borrowing from Francesca, what stories are you going to leave behind for your future generations' ancestors? What are their ancestors going to say? What struggles are they going to show? I mean, I can go back in history, and I did on One Tree, and in this one particular branch, there was story after story after story after story. And every time I went to a new generation, there was a whole bunch more stories. And the cool part is that some of these were actually documented, and they are in different books and different libraries because this family was pioneers for a particular county in a state. And so their story is told in there as well. And I was like, that's so cool. And the other day I was looking around and I found a newspaper article that talked about another family member, which I kind of knew the story and I knew I'd seen it somewhere. When I found this article, I was like, that's not the article I originally read. This is another article about the same story. So that's really cool that we have another reference to that story. So that was pretty cool. So we've got 2 different accounts and 2 different publications of this one particular story. I thought that's really cool. And from 2 different people as well. So 2 different people wrote it. And those were some hard times that those people had to go through, and some of the obstacles they had to face. Like one of them was kidnapped by Indians and taken up to Canada and was held there as along with a whole bunch of other women that they had kidnapped, were all held up there as slaves in Canada until some French doctors came along and purchased them and then released them and allowed them to go back home. And you get home 20 years later and your baby that was in a crib greets you at the door as a young man. I mean, crazy, crazy, crazy stories. And that was just part of that story. What did they go through? And so that story has been left behind future generations. So we can now learn from that during that time period in Virginia, there were, the interactions they had with these Indians and things. And so you could learn about what life was like back then. Where was the husband when his wife got kidnapped? He was off fighting a war at the time. And he came home a year later to find his wife was missing. So, what are your stories? And had these ancestors and stuff not told their stories and somebody recorded them, we wouldn't know about these stories today. You get all the historical events coming up, but what intrigues me the most and what I love the most are the personal stories about those historical times. There was been following on, is it on TikTok? And I also think on Reels, there was 2 or 3, I know there's definitely 2, but I think there might have been a third one, where they took these World War II veterans who had actually landed on the beaches at Normandy. They took them back to Normandy and they were able to tell their stories, what it was like on that day. One was a medic, one was a paratrooper, and I'm pretty sure there was a third one as well, but I can't remember what he did. About them landing on the beaches at Normandy, what it was like for them. And they were telling their stories, and these people were, they'd arranged this trip to go visit these different areas around France and Europe, in different cities, especially along in France there. Excuse me, got an itchy nose. I hate bad air quality. It's gone away now. And so they were taken to these places that they had some connection to because they had been in these landings on the beaches of Normandy. And, in a couple of weeks, we've got coming up the 80th anniversary of the landings at Normandy. And if you don't know the story behind those things, I know it's Hollywood and it's glamorized a little bit for Hollywood, but go watch the movie The Longest Day. And just remove some of the Hollywood shininess off it to get to the nitty gritty. It will give you an idea of what these guys went through. But these guys were able to tell their stories and things. And there's one picture that I absolutely loved from when these guys were there. The one who was the medic, I think. One of the guys is sitting there on the beach. He is surrounded by 4th graders from the French schools. And he's telling them his story, what it was like to land there on that beach that day. I want to be in that group. It's like I wanted to be sitting there on the beaches with him and listening to his stories about what the landing was like, his personal experience. Yes, you have all the historical books and everything that has all of the overall view of everything and can give you all the facts and the figures and the numbers and everything else, but it doesn't give you the personal stories of people who were there, who saw that action. And these 2 or 3 guys are like the last. And they're until then. One was 99, one was 97, and I think the other one was 100. There must have been 3 ones. There's one that was 103, and there was a 97-year-old and a 99-year-old. So there must have been 3 of them that were able to sit down and tell their story, and that all got recorded and everything else. And I was like, thank goodness somebody recorded all of that, and people were there listening to it and hearing it. So what have you gone through? What historic event have you gone through? What's your personal story? I mean, you've got the whole global pause thing of the last 3 years, started in 2020. That's the pandemic for those that don't know. You've got all that out there, and we've got all of the news stories, and we know how much those may or may not be true. But what's your personal experiences? What was your story during that time? What was your reaction to going into lockdowns and not being able to travel and having to wear masks and taking all these tests. And if you got vaccinated, what was that like? And, things like this. And so what was your personal story? Somebody down the road, somebody's going to, we had, was in 1912, they had the Spanish flu where people were walking around with masks on and quarantined and lockdown and all that sort of thing in 1912. Do we have any personal stories from there? I don't know. I haven't gone looking, but I would love to hear somebody's view on what it was like then and then compare it to what it was like today. And just see this, there'll be a lot of, even though take the technology out of it, there'll be a lot of stuff that's very, very similar. A lot of feelings, a lot of things like not being able to work. Yes, I know we all had computers and we had the internet and da-da-da-da-da, but take that out of the equation and what's left. And then compare your story with somebody from 1912 when they were going through the Spanish flu pandemic and see what similarities are there. Look at it from their perspective and then look at it from your perspective and, what they went through, what you're going through, what are the similarities? Because you will find that there are a lot of times in history where it just repeats. It just repeats. So anyway, with that, I'm out of here. What is your story? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And even if you don't want to publish it, but you just want to write it down so it's locked away until, see, like Mark Twain, there was, what was his book? I think it was his biography, his autobiography. He wrote it, but he didn't want it published until 100 years after he had died. And the reason he did that was and his reasoning was because then anybody I mention in the book will be dead. So they can't argue with him. I thought that was brilliant. So, you can look up, you can write out your story and have it stored away with instructions of this is not to be published until X number of years after I died, or it's not to be opened until this date and things like that. Mark Twain did that with his autobiography just to make sure that everybody he mentioned in the book was dead. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. But anyway, I'm out of here. And just remember that truth is stranger than fiction, but fiction has to make sense. We'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. He konera.